AFF TV podcast.
Hello, McIntyre's Football Fan TV. This is the Football Show. I'm joined by Gary Spain. Gary, how are you?
All good, Paul. Yeah.
Long time no see. I suppose it's very bright there. We are. I suppose. How are you finding the sunshine at the moment?
Well, I can't complain. It's nice to have the hot weather. We get enough of the cold and the wet, so I think just enjoy it while it's here. Probably won't last too long.
Absolutely. I'm like one of them squashy sweets I have. I'm half pink from sunburn yesterday. It's down in British Bay, but I suppose just people might be joining and going, what are the lads doing, talking about like kind of world transfers and stuff like that. We basically been hemming and hawing about this for a few months and saying that we were going to do it. So we're going to do a football show weekly along with obviously a League of Ireland podcast, and then we have Ger and Paul Tierney doing an Irish Abroad podcast as well, which will probably go out tomorrow. But we're going to get straight into it and talk about I suppose, who has been the signing of the summer so far. So I have a list here from Transfer Market, and the top one they have there, I think it's to do with obviously the price tag. I mean, there's three of them there. Hakimi, Upamecano, and Donnarumma. I suppose the highest rated in terms of their market value there. Donnarumma for me would probably be the biggest one on that list there, but there's still more. Like you look at it, Alaba's gone from Bayern to Real Madrid. Andre Silva has had a phenomenal season with Frankfurt after flopping at AC Milan, and now he's got to move to Leipzig. Memphis Depay, that's a bit of a strange one for me, going from Lyon to Barcelona, but they're skint, so they seem to be getting a lot of players that kind of way on free transfers. Good business by them. Kanate going to Liverpool, which I know a lot of Liverpool fans are absolutely raving about him. He's a colossus of a defender. Rodrigo de Paul had a really good Copa America as well. Him and Messi were linking up quite well as well in Argentina's team. So he's moved, I think, from Udinese to Atletico Madrid. Looks a fine player as well. Then you've got Çalhanoğlu, who's moved from AC Milan to Inter, so that's a bit of a controversial one. But I suppose out of that list, before we kind of go through some more, who has been your signing of the summer, if you have one?
Well, the obvious one for me is Donnarumma. I mean, he has been. He probably first came to Irish attention, or maybe not too much attention, when he played in Waterford in 2016. I think he was only 16 or 17 at the time for the Italian under-21s. And he's basically had a stellar career with Milan in Italy. And for PSG to get him on a free transfer, no matter what the wages, is a fantastic piece of business. And he looks like someone that could be around for the next 15, 20 years as being a top keeper, and arguably already one of the best in the world. And I think PSG have been chasing that elusive prize of the Champions League for so long. And I think maybe they, more than anybody else this summer, have been making a statement of intent, because I think Hakimi from Inter is a massive signing as well. He was very much in demand. I think the way with the modern game, the wing-backs are becoming, they work so hard. They've got to have such an engine on them. They have such an influence in the play now. So to get Hakimi was, despite the fee, in huge demand. I know Chelsea were very keen on him. I think there was a couple of other big clubs linked with him as well. And for PSG to get him is probably a real statement of intent for them. So for me, they've been the club kind of that have stood out so much in this window. And they probably want to get that monkey off their backs of winning a Champions League. They had come so close, got to the final in 2020. Got to, I think it was the quarterfinals. Bayern put them out, wasn't it? Or who put them out? Anyway, they've come so close on so many occasions, but I think they're going to be serious contenders in the Champions League this season. So for me, they're two signings of Donnarumma.
And they got
and
Ramos for free as well.
They got Sergio Ramos from Real Madrid. Appreciate he's 36, but still a top defender and a winner. He has won so much. And I'm a bit surprised. There was a lot of a will he, won't he? He seemed to want to finish his career at Real Madrid. He had been there so long, but that wasn't to be. And I know there's huge financial issues with the big two in Spain. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how he works out at PSG. But a good window for them.
I think when you look at Hakimi as well, I mean, he was highly rated when I think he was at loan at Dortmund, and then Inter got him as well. But you know, Conte is notorious for wanting those wing backs. He's obviously left, and it's a huge move for PSG to get him. Donnarumma as well. I mean, they're players that can go on for a number of years now and be probably the best in their position if they kick on that bit more, you know, especially Donnarumma. I mean, you obviously watched him in the Euros and how good he was. He was unbelievable for Italy, and then obviously coming up trumps in the penalty shootout as well. But his presence in goal, he just makes the goal look tiny. And that's even on a TV screen. Imagine what it's like up close and personal. Obviously, we've seen him when AC Milan came to Tala Stadium. So I actually got to see him play, lucky enough, live in the flesh. He's absolutely quality. But I suppose we'll go through some of the other transfers as well, just at the moment. And I know Jadon Sancho's, basically going to sign for Manchester United as well, which would be a big one for them as well. I think he's just got to do his medical, but I think the fees and everything's agreed. And Fabrizio Romano's constantly tweeting about it.
I think that's been a done deal. That's been a done deal for about a year, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think it nearly happened, came so close to happening last year. And I think the understanding has been for the last 12 months, that he'll be allowed to move this summer. And a good bit of business for Manchester United. Obviously, the fee, I think it's over £70 million, which is a lot of money. But in some ways, I think it'll keep, will it keep the fans happy? It's an interesting one for the Man United fans because they're obviously very unhappy with the Glazers. And they are meant to be spending a lot of money. I think Sancho is done, as you say. Varane seems to be very close. United have agreed terms with his agent, and he seems to want to come. Yeah, and Trippier, I'm not so sure. I think Atletico Madrid are still keen enough on keeping Trippier, but United are definitely keen on signing him. But certainly the Glazers would be. Well, I wonder, are they keeping the fans happy if they make some very big name signings this season? And will they challenge City for the title?
We actually forgot Wijnaldum actually signed as well for PSG as well. So there's another top class player that they're after signing as well. So despite everyone else struggling financially, clearly PSG are making the most of getting stronger. So that in that kind of scenario, that could work very well in their favour for years to come now. The fact that, the Spanish clubs and that are struggling to keep hold of their best players. And we always know that kind of the Brazilians and the South Americans tend to go to Spain a lot more. I know in recent years to be gone to the Premier League and stuff like that, but now they might look at Paris as a real option to stay there for a long time.
The big, and I know maybe I'm contradicting myself, but I'm actually not, because it's absolutely ridiculous. But the big concern, I suppose, for PSG is that Kylian Mbappe could move to Real Madrid. I know I've been talking about Real Madrid and they have huge financial issues, and they have, but somehow it's still being talked about that they could still spend big in this window and bring Kylian Mbappe to Madrid, and he would be a massive loss for PSG and obviously a massive addition to Real Madrid, having already got David Alaba on a free as well. So, but I take your point. I mean, there is massive money behind PSG. It's state money. It's Qatar, and I suppose we're coming into the year next year when they're going to host the World Cup, and they're already competing. I mean, they're in our group in qualifiers, admittedly playing friendlies for the World Cup. They're playing in the CONCACAF Gold Cup at the time. It would be a real feather in their cap if PSG were to win the Champions League next year. The only downside I have is, I mean, are they had a bit of a blip last year. You would expect them, they failed to win the French title. You'd expect them to come back and probably win it again by 10 or 15 points. But how competitive, maybe I'm being a bit ridiculous talking about how competitive the league is when they didn't even win it. But they had won so many in a row before that. And you just wonder, if you're a really top player like Mbappe, do you want to be playing in, with all due respects to the French league, do you want to be playing in something like the Spanish league, Serie A, or the Premier League, rather than the French league, which just isn't at that level. Once you go below PSG and even if you take the likes of Lille, etc., they end up losing all their top players. Although I do see actually an interesting one could be Nice in France, that they have significant money behind them as well. So maybe the French league is one to come in the future. I don't know. Maybe people who know the French league a lot better than me can give us their thoughts on it. And is it one that's going to become much more competitive, or are PSG just going to continue to dominate it? With the caveat they obviously didn't win it this year.
Yeah, I think just what you said there, obviously about players below that, like Depay is obviously after leaving Lyon, who would have been one of their best players. He's after leaving Lyon to go to Barcelona. He's always been one of those players who had potential to reach the top, but never really did. Flopped at Man United. Was good at PSV. I think Lyon is a type of club where he can be the big fish in the small pond. So now he's gone to Barcelona. I think this will be a real test for him. They've got Sergio Aguero as well from Man City. It'd be interesting to see how much game time he actually gets, because he picks up a lot of injuries, even though when he does play he's absolutely quality. But Pep, crying and all about letting him go, and then there was a big argument from his brother saying that Pep's like lying about it and stuff like that, so you wouldn't know what to believe. But I think those signings are quite good, and you look at it like they've got him, then who else have they got? They got Aguero. So all the Spanish clubs are making like free signings, but like they're obviously getting huge wages on top of that.
Yeah, and there are, as I said, the financial issues with Barcelona and the debt, and with Real Madrid are absolutely massive. As well. Yeah, Barcelona are actually in worse trouble than Real Madrid, and they haven't re-signed Messi yet. And the last thing I saw was they were approaching 4 of their top players, looking for them to take a wage cut. And I think even the deal for Messi was something like they'd still be paying him for the next 6 years. So obviously, I know this is more common maybe in American sports, but you sign where they have salary caps and everything. But this is the same thing probably with football fair play, or whatever way it's done now, that they would probably be paying Messi after he's finished playing, and as a way of getting around the insane wages that the top players are on these days. So Barca is an interesting one, and if anything, if you take the top 3, which it is now in Spain, with Atletico Madrid winning the league, they seem to be the ones in the best shape financially. And you mentioned their signing of the Argentinian De Paul and Diego Simeone there. They know what they're doing, and with their financial situation, you wonder, can they continue to be the number 1 in Spain, which will be interesting. And I talked about the Champions League. Obviously, PSG, it's a huge one for Atletico Madrid as well. They've come so close. Lost a couple of finals in recent years, and I'm old enough to remember them losing the 74 final in the very last minute to Bayern. Pegged back, they had it won, and got beaten in a replay, as there was in those days. But so yeah, it is interesting times. I mean, it hasn't been the massive spending, whether that's down to COVID, whether it's down to financial issues. It hasn't been the massive spending you'd expect in these windows, but still some interesting times. And if you look at the Premier League, okay, we talked about Man United. Those deals haven't been confirmed yet, but City have been very quiet. Liverpool, okay, we can talk about that centre back, that beast you're talking about. He looks a fantastic player. Konate. Chelsea have been very quiet in the window. So it will be interesting to see what happens. There's still plenty of time left, of course.
Yeah, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of huge signings in the Premier League, because basically with financial fair play, like even if you look at Everton, like they have to get rid of a lot of players off their wage bill before they can sign, any sort of big players. I know they're linked with Demarai Gray and Andros Townsend, and they signed Begovic as well, a free transfer. But they're the type of signings that they'll be getting right now till they can sell, like a Fabian Delph or someone like that who get off the wage bill, or a Wobie or someone like that, which is what they're looking to try and offload players like that who are just kind of deadwood, just there, but they're not, like Bernard as well as another one. So they have to get rid of all those types of players. I know that's just Everton's situation, but I'd imagine other clubs are like that too. And Liverpool don't normally, they might buy big on, say, one player, and then they'll kind of get a couple of players who maybe aren't world class at the moment, but as we saw with Klopp, he made Mane, Salah, Firmino, all these types of players absolutely world class. You would argue Van Dijk as well, because he wasn't elite level when he went to Liverpool, but when he was at Liverpool, he certainly was elite level, as we saw when they won the league. Yeah,
the only thing, you're right on that, but then you come to potentially the biggest stories that could still happen, and that's top strikers. I mean, Man City, you mentioned Aguero, they have just as much money as PSG. They're being strongly linked with Harry Kane. He's still on holidays after the Euros. Is he going to go to City?
And Grealish as well, aren't they? Sorry.
Jack Grealish still on holidays as well. Chelsea, I can't see Tottenham doing business with Chelsea and Harry Kane. Chelsea had been linked with Haaland. It looks like he's staying put for at least another year. Lukaku had been talked about. It looks like he's staying put at Inter. And there's even a crazy one at Lewandowski. I think he's 33 now, going for 50 million to the Premier League as well. So we could still, despite what's been said about the financial situation and offloading players, we still could have some big blockbusters, particularly for strikers, because it looks like City need a striker. And okay, they won the Premier League at a canter. But again, we're talking about the Champions League again. I talked about PSG, I talked about Atletico Madrid. City came so close to winning it this year, and that is going to be a huge priority for Pep and them next season. And you have to feel the likes of a Harry Kane or a Haaland could be the missing link for that. Thomas Tuchel, Chelsea did win the Champions League, but we're a long way off the pace in the Premier League. And I think their leading goal scorer in the Premier League was Jorginho, with something like 6 penalties. And, 6 goals, maybe they weren't all penalties. But it desperately needs a striker as well. And so you could still have some massive transfers in the Premier League. And if the Man United ones we talked about come through, you could be talking about spending a couple of $100 million if they get Sancho and the other two, who's Varane from Real Madrid and Kieran Trippier. I mean, you could be up at the guts of 200 million there. So you could still see the big clubs in the Premier League. And I talked about the big clubs, and I didn't mention Arsenal and Tottenham. Arsenal spent 50 million on Ben White from Brighton. A very promising young player.
That's confirmed yet, but it's a done deal.
I think it's more or less a done deal, yeah. I mean, he looked really good at Leeds when he was on loan from Brighton. I know they tried to sign him. Seems to be a good signing, promising young defender, maybe a bit too much money. And
he's English though. English players, their price tag's going to inflate, you know.
Yeah, maybe that is the case. I think you're right. Tottenham.
I think as well, Gary, just with that certain snake that used to play for Ireland, he'll probably be linked with Chelsea as well. He's obviously best friends with Mason Mount, so I think he could be looking at him going for an inflated price as well for Chelsea from West Ham.
Yeah, Declan Rice, that's been linked with that. I wonder, was that more? He is best mates with Mason Mount. I think they're on holidays together. But I wonder, was that more in the Frank Lampard time than Tuchel? I know it's still been mentioned, but I think that was perhaps the reason Frank Lampard ended up, or one of the reasons his managerial career ended at Chelsea, and that he was too keen to get Declan Rice and making too big a deal about it. But you could be right; that could happen as well. When you're talking,
what were you going to say about Spurs?
I was just going to say about Spurs. I mean, they've been linked with a few players, but nothing pretty major. And if they're to lose Harry Kane, it would be an absolute disaster for Tottenham. Because got no fine point about it. I mean, they had two superstars last season in Son and Kane, and they had so much up front. When you move back through the team, it's very ordinary. And can they afford to lose Harry Kane? I know he's under contract, but it looks like he's desperate to go. And another guy, actually, I know he's been linked and talked about with Man City and possibly Chelsea. I don't think Daniel Levy's going to sell him to Chelsea. It would be bad enough for the Spurs fans to see Harry Kane leave. And I think they could just about stomach him going to PSG and maybe Man City at a push, but there's no way they could see him rocking up in London. And but you could see Tottenham kind of falling out of contention even for the Champions League places. And I suppose it's very much a different financial model, maybe a better Tottenham are probably run as a better business model than some of the clubs. I mean, you wouldn't exactly say Man City or Chelsea are run as good businesses, but they're certainly run as very successful football clubs. Manchester United, just with being such a massive club, and even with all the money the Glazers are making out of it, are still run as a good business and are still making loads of money and still able to compete and sign with top players. But I suppose, despite all the success that City have had in recent years, they're still a much smaller club than Man United, and probably will, well, you would imagine, remain that way, but for how long, we'll see.
2 decades or so, probably.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder. It is an interesting one. I mean, United's global support base is just so massive, and you'd wonder how long that will continue. I mean, if you take your traditional, I suppose, Irish or British football fan, you don't change your team. You support the team you grow up with. I think when you start going around the globe now, and I mean, I've noticed this much more so in places like Asia, they're not just fans of teams and they can change the teams they support. They're also more fans of players and they can follow players. And the likes of Messi and Ronaldo have massive personal fan clubs. And I saw this in particular at the World Cup in Russia in 2018. There's so many people, particularly in the Indian subcontinent, that were there to support Ronaldo, and they were there to support Messi. And likewise, these people travel to Barcelona games, travel to Juventus games, wherever, to Real Madrid games, wherever their favourite players are playing. And they'd have much less loyalty to clubs. So it will be a test for Man United with a massive fan base, that if they're not competing for the Premier League. Now, I know they've been second a few times, but since United haven't won the Premier League since Alex Ferguson left, and it's hard to see them. You can certainly see them finishing second, but it's hard to see them winning it again, even this season. But time will come. Time will tell.
Yeah, I think one of the transfer is, like, we look at Leipzig, they've obviously let how will I say it? Upamecano. He's left Leipzig for Bayern, which he's been unbelievable. But then they got Angelino on a permanent signing. That was from Man City. And then Andre Silva, who I think he had like 29 goals in 34 games for Frankfurt after flopping for AC Milan. Ronaldo actually came out a few years ago, I think it was before he went to AC Milan, and said he was like the next big thing in Portugal. So it'd be interesting to see, because usually when someone has a season like that, Bayern go and buy them. So obviously they made their big signing in Upamecano. So
yeah, I mean, Bayern buy typically in any German off season. Bayern, they're the 300-pound gorilla.
Players, yeah.
They did just pick whoever they want. They normally go to Dortmund when Dortmund were their competitors, when Dortmund were even winning the league, and they just pick out the best players. I mean, Neuer came from Schalke, Hummels came from Dortmund, I think, if I remember rightly. They just pick off and
He
for
was
much bitterness.
Bayern originally,
So
and then he went to Dortmund and
he
back.
went to Dortmund, but he wasn't very popular when he went back. And they just pick off the best players. I mean, RB Leipzig don't have the same tradition as a Schalke or a Dortmund in Germany. They've probably become the number 2 team at the moment, and I know they're hated by a lot of German fans in with the plastic way. I suppose the club is created without the traditional German way, but they have been very successful in building sides with good managers and good players. But they do lose their best players to Bayern as well. And as has happened with Upamecano. And just another point on him, I mean, what is it with France and talented centre-backs? Because they seem to be producing so many quality central defenders in recent years. And
so much so that Laporte had to go and declare for Spain.
Well, he did. He went and declared for Spain, exactly. Because God only knows where he would have been in the pecking line for France. And they've got so many quality centre halves, just like a production line there. In the same way in the past that Argentina used to produce number 10s, like
ridiculous.
Ridiculous. But anyway, it's certainly centre halves and quality central defenders coming out of France at the moment.
Yeah, and like, to just, you look at France, even in the World Cup, the Euros, their squad, like, they have literally 2 players for every position.
Well, I mean, I was amazed they lost to Switzerland in that game. I know it was only on penalties. They had such a talented squad, and they're world champions, and you wouldn't be surprised if they went back and held on to their trophy next year. It is next year in Qatar. It comes around so fast now. But
well, that's because the extra year from COVID.
The extra year, yeah, with COVID and the Euros, yeah. And but it's they have such quality, and what a team, and they will obviously be serious contenders. They're obviously hurting big time over losing to Switzerland and Bucharest, and they will be very tough to beat in the World Cup next year.
Yeah, 100%. Another player, obviously, we're speaking about France there. Another player who's transferred from, I think it was, who was he at? Chelsea. Giroud. He's gone to AC Milan for free as well, which would be a big signing for them. I think he'd be more suited to Serie A. Isn't he not far off France's goal scoring record on Henry's record? I don't think he's far off. And if he's playing for AC Milan and doing the business there, he's likely to be still in the squad there.
Yeah, I mean, he does a job for France that they haven't really. I talked about all the quality players they have, but they recall Benzema as well for the Euros, probably through gritted teeth or something like that. They probably haven't been blessed. I know you've got the likes of Mbappe, but a different type of attacker. They probably haven't got somebody in that role. I mean, Giroud is very much at the end of his days, but he had a phenomenal season when he got game time for Chelsea. I think he got 4 goals in one of the Champions League games before Christmas. And he will obviously do a job for Milan. Maybe not play every week, but when he's called upon, he will do a serious job. And I'm sure he's still looking at going to Qatar and at least playing his part for France, if not as a starter. Just the really successful French teams, if you go back on them, they, even more so with Giroud, you mentioned he's close to the record goals tally. Strangely, he doesn't actually, to me, probably doesn't seem to score a lot of goals. And I go back to the French team that won the 1998 World Cup. I don't know if you remember a striker called Guivarch. And he wasn't...
Stefan Guivarch.
Yeah, Stefan Guivarch. He probably wasn't... The first thing you'd say, he probably wasn't very good because he didn't score a lot of goals and doesn't get remembered. But he was actually a key part of that French team, not for his goal scoring, but for what he did in the team and the space he made for others and the real unselfish role that he played in that really successful French team. I mean, you remember the likes of Petit, Vieira, Blanc, etc. But he was a key part of that. And I think Giroud to some extent performed a similar role in 2018. So good signing for Milan. They've lost, obviously, losing Donnarumma, losing you can pronounce the Turkish guy Kanalaju, the guy that ran the show in Tala for Milan against Rovers. Losing him to their closest rivals will be a big blow, because that Milan derby is and the rivalry, the intensity there is as strong as anywhere in Europe, and that's going to hurt. So
just while you're on France there, because there's like Fabrizio Romano's been tweeting that Saul Niguez and Griezmann could be involved in a swap deal. So Griezmann to go back to Atletico and Saul to go to Barcelona, which could be interesting. There's no agreement, but Barca insist they want money in the deal and players won't reduce their salaries. But it could be an interesting one if Griezmann goes back there. It'd be interesting to see how the fans take to that as well, because didn't he do like a documentary and basically announced that he was leaving for Barcelona? That move hasn't really worked out for Griezmann, in fairness, in my opinion.
No, it hasn't. Now, I saw that actually about a week ago being talked about. Now, Saul has been linked with a few clubs. He's actually been linked with some Premier League clubs as well.
Liverpool.
The problem with Griezmann is he's gone on. We were talking about the massive wages in at Barcelona. He's gone to Barca with a big transfer fee. I think it was something like 100 million. He's gone on massive wages and a big contract, and it hasn't worked out for him. I mean, look, we don't have fond memories from an Irish point of view from France 2016, but he was a phenomenal player. And just look, I'm not going to hate players just because they played really well and scored goals against us. There's other reasons to hate different French strikers in the past, but I have no gripe against Griezmann. But it hasn't really worked out, and it is an interesting transfer. It probably one that would suit Barca more than it would suit Atletico, because they would get Griezmann off the wage bill. He hasn't really clicked. I think there's issues with him playing with Messi as well. And they obviously are going to re-sign Messi and want to re-sign Messi, but there's huge financial stumbling blocks. So that could be a way of getting around it. I'm not so sure if that makes sense for Atletico. I don't know, as you say, how popular Griezmann would be if he went back to the with the Atletico fans. And because the one thing Diego Simeone does there is he really builds a great team spirit, a great bonding. Everybody plays for everybody else, and it's very easy to upset that if you kind of bring in some superstar or somebody like that could end up to be seen to get special treatment. And obviously Griezmann, well, is he going to take a pay cut to go back to Atletico? I'm not so sure.
It's mad though, because they do have such a quality team. Like obviously they added Suarez last year from Barcelona, funny enough, and they have the likes of João Felix and other players there. So where does he fit in? Really, they've got Rodrigo de Paul. They just signed as well. So it'd be interesting to see where he fits in if he is going to go back there. We're actually starting to get a couple of comments in now, half an hour into the video. But anyway, Eugene Mcgeever, who I know is an Everton fan, he says, thoughts on Townsend coming to Everton as a free agent, and Asmir Begovic, and then Gray coming from Bayer Leverkusen. All I know as far as Demarai Gray is he has a 1.5 million release clause at Bayer Leverkusen. For me, he's never really done much for me to kind of take notice of him. His name's been there. He's been, always had good potential, but he's never really done anything for me of note. He was obviously at Leicester, and yeah, for me, he didn't really do much. I think what Rafa's looking at the moment is getting wide players into the club, because Everton have not got great wingers, and I think with Townsend, he has the highest percentage of successful crosses into the box last season. So obviously with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who has the most headed goals in the Premier League last season, that seems to be, he wants to try and fix that, so get more crosses into the box for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I would assume. And Begovic makes sense. He's 34. He played 40 odd games last season for Bournemouth, and he's a reliable goalkeeper, and he's just going to be back up. So for me, I think that one makes sense. Gary, I suppose, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so Demarai Gray effectively, I think he has has flopped at Leverkusen. I think he scored 1 goal for them. It hasn't been a success, so it probably makes sense he'd come back to the Premier League. Struck me as somebody who come off the bench as maybe an impact sub at Leicester. I don't remember him starting a lot of games, but I must admit I don't have the stats or anything in front of me. But that's my memory of him when he was at Leicester. Someone who can change a game off the bench, make an impact. So maybe that's what Rafa's looking at. Townsend is an interesting one because I even remember going back when he was at Tottenham coming through. He was one of the going to be the next star. Now, he still became a pretty good player at Palace without being the superstar that maybe... If I remember rightly, he played in Tala 10 years ago in the Europa League. I think that's so, yeah. I think that's when I saw him, and he looked really good. And I definitely saw him live around that time, and he was meant to be the next star for Tottenham. And it just didn't happen. For not that he's a bad player, but I mean, I suppose going back then, if you were going to go forward 10 years, you'd be talking about him starting for England in the Euros instead of being nowhere near the squad, for example. And but someone who could still fulfill that potential or still do a decent job in the Premier League for Everton. The only thing I would say, I mean, go back a year and with Everton and Carlo Ancelotti, and you were talking that they did make a fantastic start to the Premier League last year. You were talking about them spending big money, signing James, etc., really competing for top 4. Yeah, but he's still big money. He's on big wages, and I believe they're trying to offload him now. I don't know. The feeling seems to be that he hasn't worked out. That it doesn't seem to me that this year that Everton are in the same kind of position, or I don't know. Maybe do
they just need to sell the boy basically. It's because they have money behind them with Usmanov and Moshiri there. The problem is that financial fair play. If Everton go over a certain minute, they'll be punished. But the top 6 who were trying to leave the Premier League won't get punished for trying to leave the Premier League. So,
and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to break into that top 6 when you're outside it because of all the money they're making from the Champions League, etc. Well, I know only 4 of them can be in it, but the significant money that's made out of that.
Yeah, I suppose just to finish off with one last comment there from Liam Costa. He says Konate is a very underrated sign. I must admit, I actually have never watched him. I've never seen him. I've seen all the hype around him. I've seen since January. People have been going on because I think he's been linked since January, and they obviously got him then for 31 million or whatever it was. And look, if he comes in and he's as good as everybody says he is, I think Liverpool will be right back among the chasing pack at the top of the Premier League next season. I think a lot of people wrote off Liverpool, and we're really bigging up Manchester United, but Liverpool had such a bad season with injuries, and that they were kind of square pegs and round holes for a lot of the season. They try and kind of get through the season because they had so many games with the Champions League and everything else, Europe and the Premier Leagues, and the games were like literally. I remember doing watch-alongs with you. There was just games all the time. Especially this season, every time you turn on the TV, there was a live game on. So I think that obviously didn't help Liverpool's cause. But now they're looking to get someone like him in to partner Van Dijk, or it might be a case if he's going to come in and then that allows Van Dijk to silently come in, take his time to come back rather than coming straight in and maybe getting injured. So that might be something they're looking at. But if they get the two of them fit and playing together, I think. From what people are saying, I think they're going to be right back amongst it. And I was saying about Manchester United. Manchester United had an okay season last year, but I think that's because Liverpool had such a bad season, and that's because down to injuries. And I think that unless Man United do get the likes of Varane and stuff over the line, then I don't see them breaking into the top 2.
Well, if I remember rightly, United did actually finish second last season. And
but that's what I'm saying is because Liverpool had.
Okay. Well, and Liverpool were particularly hit in central defence with Van Dijk being injured, with Matip being injured, etc. Gomez. So yeah, I must admit I haven't really seen him. I haven't watched much of RB Leipzig, but there has been a lot of hype. And the one thing is, Jurgen Klopp has a good eye for a player, and he certainly knows the Bundesliga as well. So I think Liverpool fans are probably right to get to get excited. And if Van Dijk comes back fully fit to being the player he was, suddenly those problems go away that they had in central defence. And they do seem to have kept on to Mo Salah as well, because there had been talks of him possibly leaving in contract. I must admit, I'm not up to date on it, but there had been rumours a few months ago on that. And he'd been linked, I think, to Real Madrid or Barca. But again, you've got all the money issues there. So certainly if they can hold on to their best players, I know they've lost Wijnaldum, but I think Liverpool will be a real force. And I don't want to get into the Liverpool-Man United debate because I know it just totally divides Irish football. I really wish we had any of our clubs had even a fraction of the support Liverpool and Man United do have in this country. But I know you're absolutely whatever way you say it, but I think both of them will be there or thereabouts. But Man City, for me, still look the team to beat in the Premier League.
But I said that a couple of seasons ago, and then obviously Liverpool then took over. It's because Man City, like, they are without Aguero, so they will need to buy a striker, whether that's Harry Kane or whatever. It'll be interesting to see come the end of the transfer window, and we're kind of looking at it going, okay, they look like they're going to dominate. Because it's interesting, because you think some players might work out, some players might not, though. It will be interesting. Konate may not work out as well for Liverpool, but Varane may not work out for Manchester United if that happens. But it seems as though Fabrizio Romano was tweeting about him, saying that his desire is to find a new challenge in the Premier League and he wants Man United. But as I said, if they can get Varane to add to what they have there, they've obviously got Bruno Fernandes, who's been sensational for them. They have Pogba. If they can accommodate him the way France do maybe this year, if he stays, then who knows? But they've obviously got Cavani staying on for another year as well, who had a really impressive end to the season. So if they can hit the ground running, who knows? But I just think that if Liverpool had a full strength team, I think they would have finished above them last year. I think their squad was better. But again, if Man United spend in this window more so than they are, obviously they've got Sancho, so they need to get Varane and I think Trippier. I still think they could even add another midfielder maybe in there as well. And see how they go. Lingard coming back might be a new signing as well. I feel like a new signing.
Yeah, maybe. You also have the likes of Mason Greenwood, who's going to be another year older, and he's just such a natural finisher, real talent coming through. And Marcus Rashford as well, we hardly talked about him. I know he had a disappointing end to the Euros, missing that penalty, but he's a phenomenal
and the abuse
talent.
Is shocking, absolutely shocking.
It's just disgraceful, you know. I mean, anyway, I think wouldn't even go there, but it's just horrendous stuff. And for such, in particular for Marcus Rashford, because not just a footballer, he's such an incredible human being, and all he's done with in England with the feeding of all those children and everything. He's just a phenomenal young man, an incredible young man, and just an incredible human being, not to mind an incredibly talented footballer. And I really hate to see I hate to see any kind of racist abuse, obviously, but particularly for such a fine young man as him.
Yeah, well, I think we'll end it on that. I think we've spoken about pretty much everyone we could. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and who do you think has been the sign of the summer so far. Obviously, we're still in the month of July and there's still a ways to go, but we're going to be doing a football show weekly like this. So if you have any other topics you'd like us to discuss as well, let us know in the comments. I actually really enjoyed this for the first one we've done. Big thanks to Gary, as always, for coming on. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and we'll speak to you all soon. Thanks for watching.